sorry. So at some stage, what we'll do is once we start this unit off, I will ask you to do a small one-page research proposal in where and what the area of research you're looking at doing. And once you've given us the proposal, you can go ahead and obviously start the research at your end. And then in between, we will do 2 or 3 sessions to give you understanding of the concepts of research, various things, which is the research onion in particular, what kind of research paradigm you choose, and things like that. Okay.
Yes, please.
So just looking at, and then obviously once you've done this, then we are going to start classes specifically for the healthcare units, which is working within multidisciplinary teams. That unit, we're looking at managing quality in health and social care, and obviously pick up one of the other units, which is leading practice in health and social care. So we'll try and complete about I would say 65 credits, and then do these additional 45 credits. And then the other unit that we normally tend to do is personal and professional development. Or we could look at picking up, say, something like health and safety in workplace. The social care. Okay, and obviously this particular unit, what I've done is the unit that we are studying right now, we pulled out the unit specification. So today we are looking at understanding the various approaches to differences in individual behavior. Why do people exhibit different types of behavior while they're working within the organization? And that's the one that I'm going to obviously cover today with regards to the learning outcome 2. I'm going to, after this session, as soon as I finish this session, I'm going to send you feedback on your this. Hi Phil, yeah, I've got you joining in. That's okay. Perfect. So I'll send you the feedback on that. I will send you the presentation and the recording for the previous session, so you can actually go through and catch up. And then obviously, then from now on, you'll be on course. Hi Phil. Hello, can you hear me, Phil? Can you hear me, Phil?
Hello. Yes.
Yes, good stuff. Got Wellington also, one of the other learners also on this session. So we are going to start off with obviously the learning outcome 2, which is what we are continuing on this particular unit, which talks about understanding the approaches to managing differences in individual behavior. Why do individuals actually show a certain type of behavior when they work within organizations? And parallelly, what I've got, is a bit of reading which I'm going to send to you just after this, along with the presentation. This is a particular handout which directly corresponds to approaches of managing differences and behavior within the organizations. So this will form a very good reading, and also will help you to do a bit of the assignment writing work, where you will be able to pick out basic things which are a part of the indicative content, some of the theories and frameworks. But we will discuss this in today's session, and I'll point out the relevant pages essentially that you need to read. This is a big handout because it's a common handout that we use between HRM, organization behavior, and people management. But I will direct you towards the pages that you have to read in particular, pages 54 until pages 55, and which will give you a good understanding in terms of this particular learning outcome when you look at individual behaviors. So let me start off by putting a slide on the screen, but without reading the slide, what I would want you to look at is, and maybe think about, why do you think people behave differently? Why do you think no two people behave in a similar way?
Why people behave in a similar way, right?
No, don't behave in a similar way. Why do you think people behave differently?
They have different characters.
That is correct. Yes, it's a good start. we do not see any two individuals behaving in a similar fashion is because it could be because of the differences in terms of their characteristics, as you mentioned. It could be, what else can we think of?
Different personalities.
Yeah, different personalities. Yes, it's a good point. What else can we think of?
Stress levels.
Yes, at times it could be the stress levels. I totally agree. What else can you think of? Characteristics, personality. We look at things like attitude. We look at things like their culture, their background. Even in some cases where you come from. We also look at beliefs, religious beliefs or beliefs otherwise, and that these are some of the factors or parameters which at some point in time kind of differentiate why people actually behave in a particular fashion or in a particular manner. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Now, the other thing that we look at is also in some cases you will see that sometimes people also behave in a different fashion or maybe answer a question differently is because they have different knowledge, different background in terms of experience, and their knowledge and experience allows them to kind of bring across the difference in allows them to experience and highlight the difference in perspective. When you talk about a particular topic, you will get to see that you have people coming across with different viewpoints, and that does happen because of the fact that sometimes you will see that people have different experience and different background, and also the depth of knowledge which allows them to participate in that discussion, and they are then able to bring out various differences or various points which kind of contribute to that discussion. So this particular aspect that we look at is very important when we consider organizations, and I think it will be fair to say that you must have come across this particular term wherein they say when organizations look at hiring people, they say we want to bring in somebody who has a like-minded thinking or a philosophy related to the organization, or we do not want to hire somebody who will come in and disrupt the apple cart. You've heard these terms sometimes from the HR department wherein they want to bring in individuals within the organization or to a particular team which kind of come in and have the same thinking, same type of philosophy, or are at least able to straight away play ball as far as the organizational objectives and aims and objectives are concerned. Have you experienced or have you kind of seen or heard that? Is that something that you can correlate to, or is that something that you can understand that when people say that we want to hire somebody who can come in and be a part of the team rather than being a disruptor in the team, that means what they are trying to allude is to the fact that they are looking at hiring people who exhibit a certain type of behavior or who exhibit certain types of qualities which are going to be relevant and important for them to work effectively as a team. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what we also look at is when we look at behavior in workplace, typically most organizations, most managers, leaders would kind of classify behavior in the workplace in two forms. Either it is positive behavior or is it negative behavior. So when we look at people who display or kind of display the traits, skills, and the kind of things which are required to work within teams, function within teams, work together, then in those cases what we do experience is that people display positive behaviors, because these behaviors generally tend to align with the company policies. They align with the policies and procedures which are laid down in the employee handbook, and they are generally seen to be conducive to the environment wherein the employee will work with the organization to achieve the objective set. On the other hand, what we do see is sometimes you see behaviors from an individual within the organization which are considered aggressive, which are considered out of line in the sense that they seem to be having a contribution towards being disruptive within the organization. That could mean both in good ways and also in bad ways. That means sometimes when you look at people who become leaders within organizations, they tend to exhibit behavior which is disruptive because they think differently, they are a bit more creative, or they are looking at bringing innovation into work. But generally within the organizations, what we do is we classify behavior as two types. One is positive and the other is negative behavior. Now, the classification of these behaviors can only be done on the basis of characteristics or traits that we identified before even we started this discussion. So sometimes you will see individuals showing positive behavior because they understand the company objectives, they understand the goals, and they are able to align themselves with the company goals. And because they have that attitude of aligning and kind of working together within a team to be able to achieve the aims and objectives, their behavior is seen to be classified as a positive behavior. But sometimes you do get to see that the people who have more knowledge or maybe more skills and have the prior background and experience do not align in those situations because they do feel that at some point in time their learning is not happening within the organization. So they develop a certain type of attitude or exhibit a certain type of behavior which is seen to be negative because they are not seen to be aligning with the objectives required to work within the team or within the department to achieve the aims and objectives. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Now let's look at in a bit more detail, just like a few points on what is positive behavior at work. How do people show positive behavior? How do we pick out or understand the signs in which people are showing positive behavior? So normally what you'll see is people who display positive behavior are helpful. So for example, you have somebody in your office and as a colleague, they probably, they've had a bit of a mishap that they've slipped, but you have people walking by next to them and they will say, okay, they immediately come, to help that other person and obviously pick that person up or, give him a bit of support. And that is generally seen to be a behavior which is trying to, help people or show that they have a helpful attitude towards, other colleagues within the environment. And that exhibits something which is aligned as positive behavior. So you're basically trying to help solve problems. You're trying to find solutions to the problems. So sometimes when you have your team meetings, what you get to see is that during the discussion, maybe your manager, your supervisor gives you a certain bit of opportunity to explain or, discuss and come up with a solution to a problem. So you will see that people who get who try and participate in the discussion to come up with ideas or, ways in which the problem could be resolved are seen to be exhibiting positive behavior. And the ones which are sitting on the fringes or maybe not having a discussion or not being seen as active within those discussions would be considered, okay, you're not participating. Sometimes you will have a comment which will come in and say you're not participating in the discussion. You might not want to participate because you have already some ideas that you could put forth in the discussion, but you're not exhibiting that behavior which shows that you are being participative. And that is why sometimes it is perceived as negative behavior. So people who generally show positive behavior, things like they're willing to help, they're always available, they are kind of, willing to help colleagues and employees within the organization, within the department. They might take out some additional work at some point in time to help ease the burden on, on other colleagues, are basically showing what is called positive behavior. Now, you will also see examples which, wherein sometimes, and I hope you'll be able to correlate to this, is when we had the financial crisis, what most companies did was, some of the companies which are obviously large organizations, it led to a lot of redundancies because of the reduction in the work and the economy contracting and things like that. But there were certain organizations which basically put forward this particular constraint because of financial crisis, the decline in business, to their employees. And when they did that, what basically they did was that the employees decided, or say like the public sector, for example, there's a cap on the pay or 1% rise in terms of the cap on pay rises within the public sector. They were seen, obviously the government could not, or the large public sector organizations could not, make the employees redundant as the private organizations would have. But there, the increase in, the salaries or wages was basically, capped to 1% rise in order for them to kind of tide that time. So people who aligned with that and obviously showed that positive attitude of understanding the financial crisis, the decline in business, and understood that the top management, for example, took a pay cut, or the top management decides that they will not take any increments in salary this year or next year, actually was seen to be exhibiting something called a positive behavior. They seem to be showing that there's a problem. They seem to be showing that because of this problem, this particular pay cut has to be taken, or the rise in pay has to be foregone, and they seem to be exhibiting behavior which is aligning with the organization. Can you correlate to that? Yeah. Now, it may also be said that sometimes when you exhibit positive behavior, it might not be implied that the person is showing positive behavior, but there are certain actions that you take, or the body language itself within the way you kind of coordinate yourself could convey that you are either showing a positive behavior or is showing a negative behavior. And a very good or a common example of this is what we see when we get into team meetings. We all are invited to the team meeting. For example, if your manager has called one, you don't want to go in, but you still go in. And what some of the employees are seen to be doing is, okay, there's another meeting. It's going to be another, an hour of this and that. It's going to be quite cumbersome. We have to prepare reports and all that. But some employees still show the enthusiasm and, the willingness to go to the meeting, and their body language, their passion, and, they might exhibit this, but they might not be showing internally, they might not be very aligned to attending that meeting. But their body language still shows that they are willing to go along and give it another try, or get into this meeting. So sometimes you get to see that even if you do not want to employ that you want to show this, or but your body or your body language, your attitude, the way you conduct yourself still portrays a negative or a positive behavior, isn't it?
Yeah.
So sometimes when you call for a meeting and you sit with your arms closed, you're seemingly, the body language basically is saying that you are not open for discussion. You're kind of just forced into the discussion and things like that, but you're not willing to contribute. You're not willing to listen. So these are things which when we manage people, the whole idea of studying this particular unit, when at the managerial level, when we manage people, these are things or skills or traits that we have to learn. And some of these things we have to learn because we have to be able to manage employees or manage staff effectively to be able to get work done. And these are things, these are the reasons why we have to study, obviously something related to this learning outcome too, is that how do we pick out positive or negative behavior when you are in a particular situation? How do you differentiate between the two? And that is what we are looking at examining, in this particular learning outcome. So your body language does a lot of talking, even if you're not physically talking, or physically seen to be talking. But your language, the body language, the attitude that you show, and in general, the way you conduct yourself can exhibit positive and can exhibit negative behavior. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Now, let's look at the reverse side. The flip side of it is how people show negative behavior, and why do people show negative behavior? What is negative behavior? So negative behavior is generally considered, when we can look at it from a discussion point of view in a workplace, as people when they show aggression or aggressive behavior in particular. You will see situations wherein sometimes some employees become a bit more aggressive with their colleagues in terms of their discussion. If they are not getting their way in terms of having their side of things taken or understood in the discussion, they become a bit more aggressive. And there is a thin line differentiation between being aggressive and being passionate. Sometimes you will see that people withdraw from the discussions altogether because they see that the other side is not able to see their viewpoint altogether. And rather than being aggressive, or rather than put that point across in a different way, what they do is they totally withdraw themselves, which also can exhibit, withdraw themselves from the discussion altogether, which can also say that they are not conforming or participating in that discussion, which could mean negative behavior. And sometimes you will see that people get displaced because of the fact that they seem to be losing their point of view or interest, and that is where you will see that it also kind of becomes, negative behavior. Now, the other bits that we look at in terms of, understanding, when we look at a lot of, an extreme form of negative behavior, that sometimes you will see when you get into situations is that it leads to physical destruction of something. It could be destruction of maybe some sort of a property, maybe a damage to an office property. Sometimes it could be abusive language, and these are also clear indicators of negative behavior. Now, sometimes what you get to see is that there could be situations which develop within colleagues which also exhibit negative behavior. And an example of this could be something which comes across, say for let's say for discussion's sakes, you've two sales managers, and one of the sales managers has outperformed the other. And what then tends to happen is the person who has been outperformed or has not been able to meet the target, let's put it this way, that person finds lots of excuses, lots of reasons of why the target could not be reached. And in that justification of why it could not be reached, sometimes you see that person looks at exhibiting negative behavior because they will put forward points which are going to be negative points towards the other person's achievement. So sometimes you put this across in a very negative fashion, maybe a particular trait or quality of a person, rather than kind of admiring that quality, but you put it across in a negative way, which also shows, or maybe put it in a falsified manner, which also shows negative behavior. And negative behavior can actually lead to a lot of damage to the organization. And this damage could be, for example, if an employee ends up leaving the organization on a wrong note. Why do you think HR managers now in most organizations stress on an exit interview with the employee? The reason why they do it is they want to understand the exact reasons of why you're leaving. Are you leaving on a positive note? Are you leaving on a negative note? Is the reason of leaving, personal? Is it professional? They want to understand that leaving the organization in a bad mood, would it kind of create damage, or would it damage its reputation in terms of relationship with customers? And those are various reasons why you look at exit interviews now when employees actually leave the organization. And this is done primarily to minimize the damage which an employee leaving the organization. So negative behavior could also be, things like, in extreme cases, leakage of data. I know that, I don't know how many of you have looked at, but for example, the iPhone leak, which happened a couple of days ahead of its launch on the September 12th, Apple is a very secretive organization. And secrecy is something which is a part of their employee handbook. That means when employees join, they're sworn into a code in terms of the work ethics and what they can or cannot talk outside the organization. So this kind of a leak, just days before the launch of the new iPhone, was considered a major breach of data, and that could have happened because of maybe maybe a gruntled employee within the organization saying that, okay, I need to take a mickey at the organization because I've been suffering from this or that. So it could be an effect of a negative outcome, and then showing the negative behavior wherein they decided to kind of leak the data, or it could be for financial reasons that the person would have decided to leak the data, and that had caused this has caused maybe it's taken out a bit of a phase out of the launch of the new phone, but these are reasons why we need to be wary of employees which exhibit or show negative behavior within the organization. Is that understandable? Is that understood?
Yes. Yeah.
Now let's look at how do we manage these differences. Now, what does behavior do? Behavior actually creates differences. Now, if I have a positive, kind of a outlook towards certain situation, and some of my colleagues have a very different outlook towards that situation, if the outlooks do not match, or if we do not agree at some stage as colleagues, then it can lead to differences. And when differences lead, when you have differences which happen because of the outcome of negatives rather than some together positives, what you get to see is that this needs to be effectively managed at the workplace, and this management, require this particular difference in terms of the, the behavior shown by the individuals in the organization requires effective management. Now, if it is not done, then it can lead to, some sort of a drawback, loss of business, loss of reputation, and a whole host of other things, within the organization. Now, how do we manage differences? Let's understand these differences can happen because of behavior, what kind of behavior they're showing, positive or negative, but differences do arise, and these differences then restrict, people from either working as a team or restrict people from actually positively contributing towards a particular objective. So differences have to be managed, and these differences could arise because of discrimination. These differences could arise because of difference in pay packages, for example. It could arise in terms of preferences, because the way managers prefer employees, or give preference to employees. And in some cases, these differences in behaviors can happen because the organization itself is undergoing a change, but the individuals working within those departments or within those roles do not appreciate or like that change happening, and they then start to exhibit or show behavioral differences towards the change which are coming across the organization. So many of these situations, which basically lead to how individuals generally behave within a workplace, can be influenced by lots of situations which are internal and external to the organization. So, for example, during the financial recession, when we had a lot of retrenchment in a lot of organizations, redundancies as a result of this, it created a lot of resentment, in particular with employees within the organization. They said, okay, just because the business has gone down, some companies just ruthlessly laid off people with the pretext of the business is not there, the demand is not there, and they kind of made employees redundant, and that created a bit of a behavior of insecurity within these organizations. So nobody knew that if I'm going to be next, or this department is going to be next, and because of which the work and the productivity and the output of the organizations were affected. Now, you can also see, if I look at picking up an example from an external environment point of view, austerity, in general, cuts in general, which the government is trying to do in order to balance the book, has not gone down well with, public in general. And this has caused a lot of resentment. And this resentment is also coming out in terms of, behavioral differences, which we get to see when we have, people walking down to the parliament, or maybe, picketing or things like that. That they've been let down by the government in terms of running austerity for such a long period of time. And this has led to, obviously the overall income stagnating, not growing at the pace as they need to grow. And the inflation is kind of outstripping the growth in terms of incomes or salaries, which is happening for individuals generally within the private and the public sector. Now, these are nothing but behavioral differences, and these have to be resolved. If it's an external one, like you had the government now backing down on that pay freeze of 1% for the public sector employees, has backed down because they do see that at some stage, these, if they are not tackling the situation now, this will lead to major catastrophe in terms of strikes, balloting, and those kind of things happening within large-scale organizations. So sometimes you will get to see that these differences arise because of the external factors, which we can analyze through PESTEL as a framework. So it could be political factors, it could be economic factors, social factors, and when we kind of compound and start affecting the productivity and efficiency of the organization, managers have to get down to resolving these differences, whether it's creating a positive attitude or positive attitude towards the organization, or is it creating a negative attitude towards the organization. Is that okay?
Yeah.
How to identify these is you get into obviously doing some analysis using frameworks like Pesto. You look at stakeholders, and the stakeholders will need to be identified in terms of who are the key people they need to speak to influence them. They then talk within their teams to be able to work through those differences to align behaviors or kind of bring the situation under control. So behaviors are important within workplace in a nutshell. They can be positive, they can be negative. They are influenced by internal and external factors within the organization. And as managers, what we need to be able to pick up is the skills and traits that we need to develop when we get into managerial shoes, or when we become a manager and have that roles and responsibility, that we need to have the tools and techniques to be able to manage these behaviors, whether they are positive or they are negative. Okay, and in order to understand and better manage these behavioral differences, we need to understand the reasons where they are coming across. We need to look at the individual personalities, the kind of people that we work with, what attitudes they show, what are the key embodiments of culture, religious beliefs, and when we look at things like the opinion of employees in general, and all these factors have to be looked into to manage this effectively, so that the organization develops a conducive atmosphere for employees and for the organization to achieve its goals. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, what I will do is basically, how do we look at reducing these differences? Some of the points I've summarized, but if I look at this slide here in particular, how do we look at managing these behaviors within organization? One is the foremost important thing that we look at is we always stress on open channels of communication. Sometimes you will see that these differences arise because there's not clear enough communication happening within employees or within a particular department. So communication as a channel is one of the key, one of the keys to be able to solve, differences in terms of, differences amongst employees within a workplace. There are further areas that we can look at is sometimes what we need to be able to do is identify need of employees. If you provide, as they say, as employer, if you're able to provide the basic resources and the motivation to the employees to be able to work, you would normally see that most employees work within the remit of what the role and responsibility is, and they work towards rather than against the organization. Sometimes you will see that the behaviors can also be managed and positively propagated amongst departments and other employees if announcements, small steps like announcements of recognition are positively put out in the workplace. So most organizations, if you see in the retail and the services sector, the financial sector, have a reward and employee mechanism like Employee of the Month. What they want to do is basically, in some cases they have a financial reward, but in some cases they have a recognition of the Employee of the Month, and that sends out, let's put it this way, that kind of promotes positive behavior, because it kind of motivates others who have not been able to achieve that to work towards it. And it might have some financial benefits, it might not have some financial benefits. Sometimes you see training and development within the staff, within the organization, also creates and helps you, kind of iron out differences in the workplace. As we initially said when we started, that sometimes you look at these differences which arise because there's a difference in terms of knowledge and understanding and experience amongst employees. So training is an essential tool which bridges the gap of making sure that every employee within a particular department or every employee within a particular type of role has received the training and knowledge to be able to upgrade or kind of reskill, so that they have enough to understand the roles and responsibilities given for them to execute in that particular area. The other obvious ways are that sometimes what you tend to do is if you're looking at, if HR managers are looking at identifying traits, then regular review and appraisal processes pick out these things in terms of negative behavior if somebody is consistently showing that behavior. Somebody is consistently not complying with the rules and regulations. For example, reporting to office. Uh, Imagine if you're working within a manufacturing or an engineering company like a car motor company, and your shift starts at 8 a.m. in the morning, but you repeatedly, kind of come late and start your shift late. So maybe they will give you a few warnings, but at some stage, what they will say is the employee, after a few warnings, they might put you into a training to do a bit of time management. And if you're still not able to do it, then they normally see that either the person is not serious about the job or the role, or they see that this as an excuse to kind of, not comply with the rules and regulation. And in order for this not to spread, what they do is they normally either change the department of that person or give him a different responsibility, or the person is normally shown the door, because they don't want this negative behavior to be building within the company, wherein it kind of stands to then disrupt the, the general and the functioning of the organization. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, just let's look at, the second part of our discussion is, let's look at this, what kind of management style suit, and in what, which type of behaviors, what management styles are used to be able to differentiate and manage these behaviors. So there are 2 or 3 management styles or theories that we in particular will really, kind of relate directly to this topic. And one of them is basically the, the theory X and Y. For some of you, obviously, theory X and Y, a bit of background which I put is that this was, a theory proposed by one of the psychologists, in the early 60s, Douglas McGregor. And he basically proposed 2 sides to management. There is something which is the X side, which is the Y side of management. So his theory then came about as the theory X and Y theory of management. And basically it proposed 2 aspects. One is the human side of enterprise. And obviously this is a book in which he has written. So the theory X basically conforms to saying that, the management style is normally authoritarian. That means you typically would have, managers or management working within the remit of being authoritative. That means democratic behavior, and they expect that whatever is said is actually done by the staff and the employees in the organization. The other style which he proposed, which was Y, was that the managers tend to follow a participative style. That means they invite suggestions, they invite participation from colleagues or people within the team to be able to get the work done. And this then became, a standpoint of kind of understanding how and which management style you get to see when you exhibit or when you get to see different behaviors within the organization. It is, quite central to the studies that we do in organization and behavior, in human resources, and in particular people's management, wherein we get to see that the way the manager kind of works within the organization and they develop and exhibit a particular type of working influences organization structure and culture within the organization. An example here would be when you look at organizations like, let's put it this way, the organizations like Enron, organizations like Northern Rock, these organizations, why did they fail? Or why have they failed? Is because here there was an autocratic culture wherein there was no, way wherein employees at the middle management or employees at the lower management level could question what the targets and objectives were set by the top or the senior management. So this particular authoritarian style, or the style which works top down, did not allow some of the gross mistakes which were running within the organization to go, to be checked. They all went, these kind of the processes within the organization kind of led to a downfall of the company because nobody had the authority to be able to question the senior management. And this led to the downfall of the organizations. Even though they were quite large, diverse, and had lots of employees in terms of basic things which are available with these organizations. Let's look at a bit more detail in terms of this particular theory and understand. So this American psychologist McGregor, what he suggested was there are two fundamental approaches to managing people. You have managers which manage people in two different approaches. One of the approaches is basically something called, what he basically, these two approaches then were called as X and Y. And when we looked at X approach was authoritative and the Y approach, which was participative. And in the end, when the result, when this particular study was carried out in the Western Electric, company in America during the 1930s, they put some of the employees under a test simulation to, come out and obviously study the results. So what they found was many managers who kind of followed X as a pattern, which was authoritarian style of management, never, generally got poor results from their team or their workers. And managers who basically followed theory Y, or basically participative side of things in terms of managing him, actually were able to produce better performance and results, which also allowed people to grow and develop in their roles. And this particular study was actually carried out, between the 1930s in this company, Western Electric Company in Chicago, and it found that when managers involved people in the work and allowed them to think and bring in innovation and think creatively within their roles to better achieve the aims and objectives, yielded more productive results, or they were able to get more work done from the same set of employees under the same environment. So let's look at, for example, theory I mentioned earlier, which is authoritative style. So here, what they said was the average person dislikes work and will try and avoid if they can avoid work. Because you are asked to do the same type of work on a day in, day out basis, the people at some stage became switched off. They started to dislike the work they were doing. And therefore, in this pattern wherein the manager did not involve job rotation or maybe changing a bit of or bringing a bit of variation in the work of the employee, they then thought that they were being forced to do the same work on a day in, day out basis, and work actually became a bit of, it kind of started to feel like it is a bit of a punishment rather than they're working towards achieving the organizational goals. And because of this, what tended to happen is that the employees started to avoid the work, avoid taking additional responsibility, and they were happy doing just the work which was given. So if no work was given by the manager, they did not seem to be very productive or proactive in terms of picking up other jobs and responsibilities. But at the same point in time, they felt that this is something which is being forced upon them and is not helping them to grow and develop within the organization. The other side was participative, not very difficult to understand, but here what they tried to do was the managers create an environment which is conducive, which the employees want to work in, and have a general outlook in terms of being, inviting. That means they invite them to participate, they invite them to delegate and exchange responsibilities, which promotes a sense of commitment and buy into the objective of the organization, and as a result it creates more productivity and it creates more ownership of work within the organization. And this style of management is the style of management which most companies want. And if you look at today, when differences are arise within the organization, the managers have to listen. They have to be all ears to be able to understand what the problem is, and they have to listen to each and every individual to be able to understand why and what are the circumstances which created that situation. And because they are all ears, it shows that it has a participative style of management wherein they are all bodies trying to reach out, and then they come to some sort of a conclusion. Is that okay?
Yeah.
And the other bit that we will look at is there was one other study which was obviously, when it led to the creation of this, and this particular study which I was mentioning, led to the creation of this X and Y theory was the Hawthorne studies, which was conducted by one of the other, scientists, Elton Mayo and Fritz, in the 1920s in the Western Electrical Company. And here it came out with 3 or 4 things. This, together with the Maslow's theory, talks about that in general, if you have managers which are more compassionate and they are more willing to listen to the employees, are more productive as compared to when the company looks at just providing, say, for example, maybe the right financial incentives or the infrastructure for the employees to be able to do the work. This was another interesting studies which was carried out, and this study basically pointed out when it was done in the Western Electrical Company was that they put some experiment down saying that if the employees worked under the right kind of light within a company, then they thought that the employees are going to be much more productive. And as against the other side of the experiment was that if the employees are given, right or good working conditions, and the managers are willing to listen to the suggestions and invite participation from the employees working within that group or that team, are still more productive than the financial incentives or the right working environment given for the employees to work within the organization. And these kind of things is what we need to understand when we look at, in particular, to solve differences or behaviors to kind of evolve positive behaviors within the organization. So managers here have to look at understanding these studies and experiments and learn from them to be able to put them into practice by understanding that sometimes if you are listening to your employees or listening to your staff members, it is more important than looking at providing financial incentives, right infrastructure, working conditions. But the participative style of management allows you to then bring them together and make them work together in terms of to be able to produce the right end results which the organization requires. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Any questions on this? Anything that you would like to add, in terms of anything that you can correlate to that the slides that we have covered today? Have you seen this kind of working within the within your sector, within your company, within the organization that you work in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think at my end, I have a mixture and merger of all these management styles. Sometimes to try and get the work done from my staff is because if I ask them to stay a bit late, I have to create a conducive environment, things like maybe ordering a pizza or, because that gets them involved. They forget that the time is, time is late, but if you create the right conducive environment, like when we have our, say for example, I can remember this, that planning for the graduation, a month-long activity, which it took, obviously culminated in only 4 hours, but the month-long preparation process meant that we had to do a lot of evenings and a lot of long days, hectic work to be able to coordinate all that. But within that, I had to look at differences. I had to understand nuances of all my staff, understand, a bit of their background, and also created, also had to create conducive environment for them to stay back and do the long hours. So in some cases, it meant financial incentives. In some cases, it meant, just the normal incentives, things like making, maybe some refreshments and other bits and pieces available. Sometimes looking at managing taxis and, sometimes looking at doing positive prep talks to say that, this is a big opportunity or, it's an important event. And those helped me to manage, this particular, large event and positive outcomes, because I was able to manage behaviors, I was able to manage attitudes, and I was able to manage the expectation in terms of financial incentives and their involvement to be able to get the work done. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what I'm going to do is obviously stop here. This is a small learning outcome just with 2 tasks. So I managed to cover this today. But in addition to this particular slide, what I'm going to do is, as I mentioned to you earlier, I'm going to send you a bit of a handout. I think I'll mention in the email the pages that you need to go through, which will give you some, it's like, you'll have some additional bit of reading and a background in terms of why this was done and, how it can be done. And this handout is going to be useful in general, and we will use this across one of the other units as well when we do it in the future. So the reading from this will also help you to put together some sort of work for your assignment as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions and queries as usual? If not now, then more than welcome to send across on the email. And this presentation handout I'm going to send out along with the handout for the first learning outcome that we covered last week. Okay.
Okay.
Good stuff. So I'm going to stop here for today, and